What did they say? Drama?
It means endurance with dignity. Gaman is a word.
When the new musical Allegiance went into preview performances last month, it was still being tweaked, says book writer Lorenzo Tioni.
It's like archaeology. It's like a story is down there, it lies down there, and you just have to dig it up.
What I have learned in sort of unearthing the story of the internment is that a lot has gone unspoken for 70 years.
That's composer Jay Kuo.
The Japanese-American culture would sooner bury the indignity and the shame than speak about it, and that was the way things were for decades. And it wasn't until generations had passed and people began asking more questions that these stories started to come out in greater force.
Stories like those of George Takei, who was 5 when he was taken to a Japanese-American internment camp.
My most vivid memory, I think, is that day when the soldiers came marching up, 2 soldiers came marching up our driveway. They had bayoneted rifles, and I remember the glinting of those bayonets. Stomped up our front porch and banged on the front door and ordered our family out.
We had never thought in a million years thought we would write a musical set during the Japanese-American internment. But just hearing George tell that story, you know when you're hearing a great story, then we also realized this was a story that, for some reason, had never been told on the big Broadway stage before.
As a composer, Kuo writes in the language of music and always saw the story as a musical.
What music does is liberate the spoken word into the emotional. And the emotions that are buried underneath the things that haven't been spoken for so long are so intense that the music allows them to come out. And so lately I've been saying, well, how could this story not be told in music?
And for Takei, it was important to look at a time when the nation faltered.
I think we learn more from those chapters than we do from the glorious chapters that we have plenty of. And the internment story is still little known and even less understood.
You know, I knew about as much about the internment as pretty much any American, which is very little.
Mark Aceto helped write the book for the play. Actress Lea Salonga says schools do little to inform students about the Japanese-American internment.
There are a lot of kids that are saying, I read a lot of stuff on Facebook, and they're like, we only got one paragraph of this entire abominable experience to this entire community of people. 4 to 5 years of what is incarceration in an internment camp. How do you encapsulate that in a paragraph in a textbook? You can't.
Even Kuo, who was a civil rights attorney and worked on cases involving the internment, felt he could learn more.
What I hadn't experienced was sort of on a personal level, a lot of the personal stories. And so I find myself drawn in by diaries and poetry and things, art made by the internees, incredible things that needed to be given voice.
Something Takei felt was long overdue. But the tone of the play may surprise you with its humor and hope.
Yes, it was torturous and harrowing at times, but people still fell in love. They got married, had children. So there was joy. You can't survive something like that with all grim suffering.
Because the reality is there were moments of lightness and life just happening, you know, within the confines of barbed wire fences. A lot of the internees who were farmers, they were actually able to tame the ground and grow vegetables.
It was a doom and gloom situation in which they managed to bloom where they were planted, and it's enormously inspiring.
The internment was more than just a violation of civil rights. It raised a divisive series of questions within the Japanese-American community about where one's allegiance lies.
When this happens to you and your family, where does your allegiance lie? Does your allegiance, for example, lie with the country that did this to you? Do you still pledge allegiance to the United States even if your due process and equal rights have been violated?
For Takei's father, the answer was a resounding yes.
My father used to say both the strength and the weakness of our democracy is in the fact that it is a people's democracy. It can be as great as people can be, but it's as fallible as people are.
Family members are also imperfect, and the family at the center of the play is torn apart by its own questions of allegiance.
Do you keep allegiance to a family where your family is fractured? Do you resist the government? Do you stand up and put your family at risk?
For the lack of a better term, we always call this like the call your dad story, because it's about, sort of that feeling of regret that can come when family relationships get damaged, and what can one do to really fix those and mend it and move forward.
This was an event that fractured the Japanese American community 70 years ago, and it's still fractured today. And I think that means to me that it's these wounds are not completely healed, and that all of the things that we're talking about are still relevant.
Allegiance is groundbreaking, not only for its subject matter, but also for providing Asian American actors with an opportunity to break out of stereotypes and play multidimensional roles.
Everybody of Asian descent who was doing the show, it isn't lost on any one of us how big of an opportunity and how wonderful of a chance this is to tell a story like this one.
I want something